he asked me to do this a couple of weeks ago, I was like, yeah, I'm totally in. I'm an artist. I've been doing this my whole life. That's all I do is talk about this subject. And okay, so I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Gabrielle. I am a professional artist. I've been selling my artwork since people would give me money. So that was like, 7 or 8 years old. I'm like, $3, that kind of thing. And it wasn't because it was good artwork. It was just because I was willing and I was ambitious that way. And it might have had something to do with my history, which I'll get into. But so when she asked me this, I'm like, of course, this is my subject. This is me. I'm excited about this. This is my life. This is what I have to do every single day to produce something or to even just sit and muse about things. And then I was like, okay, what am I gonna say? I'm gonna be so awesome. It's gonna be great. These people are gonna be so inspired. And then nothing. And then more nothing. And then I'm like, okay, I'll make up a scenario. If somebody came to me and said, what about this? What would I say to them? Nothing. And I was just like, I was wilting under the pressure of what has happened. I know this. And what started to happen for me was that I haven't identified my own muse in a while. I'm in a period of time in my life where I'm just kind of going through the motions. And so I was like, oh gosh, not here again. This sucks, and if you're creative, everybody's creative. But if you do it for a living, everybody goes through that period where you're just like, nothing's coming, nothing, I don't care about anything, you're just stomping around all the time. And so I was thinking, okay, I need to dig really deep. And so for the last 4 or 5 days, I've really been spending a lot of time on the inside instead of trying to come up with something to say to you to inspire you, because I probably don't have anything, but we'll see by the end of it. Anyway, so I started thinking, okay, how do I do this? How do I ever find my muse? I'm gonna read this, is why I'm holding it, but I'll forget if I don't. And it's to look into my history. It's to look into where have I come to a crossroads and had to really dig? What are those points in my life? And so those are hard sometimes. Like, you don't want to go back to these, oh, I was in this hole and I had to dig out, or I was at this, really hard relationship breakup, but that is how we find the next step. That is how we move on, is to look at these hard things. And so I went back to my history. And so a little bit about myself. I was born to 2 teenagers in 1970. They did not obviously want to have children when they were 16 years old. Here I am. And it was also 1970, and so these teenagers all lived in a house together in what is now Goodies, if anybody's been to the ice cream shop. That's where we all lived. And they bring home this little tiny baby. I was born a month early, lots of struggles, and to a house of 11 or 13 different people that lived in this house, including my mother, sometimes my dad, her siblings that had been abandoned by her mother, and all these other kind of misfits that had all congregated into this house. And now they have this baby that is miserable. And I can't even imagine what their lives are like. I can't imagine, but it was the beginning of the formation of me. And so they just decided, you know what, we're gonna do what we know how to do, and that is be hippies. And hippies at that moment were, they were growing their own food, they were trying to be peaceful, they were trying to inspire others, they were trying to make art, they were, my parents actually started the Boise Co-op in that house in 1971, and they were all hungry. I mean, we ate out of dumpsters. I mean, it was a really difficult time because they were just a bunch of kids, basically age 11, and my mom was the oldest at 17. And so they started thinking, how can we make life different? Like, this kid, this baby is the future. Like, the sexual revolution had begun, the information, people putting information out there that was different than everything that the boomers had been taught. And so they were like, what can we do? This baby's the future. And so what they did with me was probably unique. And it was that I wasn't a kid. I was never really like, oh, you go play, the adults are gonna do this. I was always involved. And so if they were meditating, I was meditating. If they were eating sesame seeds, I was eating sesame seeds. I mean, it was just kind of this, it was a true commune in that way. And I was formed into the idea that possibilities were endless, that you could do anything, that you could be anything. And of course, along the way, that hasn't always worked out, but I believed it, and they believed it. And so in the midst of all of that kind of poverty and communal living and really supporting each other, they made really good choices in the sense of they helped each other, they grew together, and then obviously there was lots of bad things too, because in a house full of teenagers, things don't always go well either. And there was things that are difficult, and that isn't part of the story. But so at some point my mom was like, this is hard, somebody needs a job. And so she went back to school, she got a degree, she got a job, which was amazing. And we eventually moved to Alaska, where then I went from one kind of magical situation into an even more to be in Alaska. And I was able to dog mush, and I was an only child, so of course I got to do more things than I have 4 kids. My kids never got to do really cool stuff like that. But I was able to save up my money and buy these dogs and learn how to dog mush and race dog teams and to live in Alaska, and when it's light all the time and running around and building forts and again, we were surrounded by all of these people that were intellectuals and poets and artists, and anything's possible. So I'm thinking, yes, I can do anything. I could even be an NBA basketball star, not really. But, and so I went off to college, and I immediately realized nothing's possible. This sucks. Oh my gosh, you have to be here at this time. You got to turn in this assignment. I was the worst college student. I mean, I changed my major 8 times, from research biologist all the way, fine, I'll be an artist, And, I went through 4 different universities because I was like, oh, this one sucks, I'm going to this one. And I moved around the country, and every time I moved, I lost credits. And, so after 4.5 years, I realized I didn't know what I was going to be. I didn't have any goals. I didn't have any aspirations, but I had been raised to believe that all of these things were possible. And it didn't feel like anything was possible. Like there was no epiphany. There was no revelation about anything. And so I just thought, okay, I need to do something else. So my husband and he was chasing his dream. So we started traveling, and we lived everywhere possible for about 10 years. And that was a really cool time for me, because it closed off kind of the wounds that college didn't give me. Like college just killed all of that in me, because it was so rigid, and there's so many expectations, and I was really stubborn. I wasn't a good student. And yeah. And so so we traveled, I came home. At this point, by now I'd had 4 children. So now I was this super free spirit with 4 kids in a house in Boise, Idaho. It was depressing, to say the least. I was just like, it was so domestic and so hard. And I didn't know, I just was just spiraling deeper and deeper into this is what my life was. I was supposed to be something. I was going to be, I don't even know what I was going to be, but I was going to be something. And I'm sitting in this house with these kids, and I finally get them all to sleep. And I had 4 kids in 4 years and 7 months. That is not recommended, but, and believe me, my doctor at one point is like, do we need to have a talk about the birds and the bees? Like, how this happened. I'm like, I'm not doing this on purpose. And anyway, so I have all these kids finally asleep, and I'm literally lay down on the carpet, and it smelled like feet and Cheerios and whatever. And I'm like just kind of sobbing, and I just don't even know what to do. And I, and I'm like this, and I'm crying out. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to be? Like, these people are looking to me, and I'm lame. Like, I'm boring, and I yell at people, and I want the dishwasher done a certain way. And, and I mean, I'm like, this is not who I want to be. What am I supposed to be doing? And I spot a Cheerio in the distance. And I'm like, okay, I can focus on this Cheerio. And when I was a little kid, back to this history of all these hippies, there's this meditative practice where you light a candle, you stare at the flame, and then you burn that flame into your mind's eye. You close your eyes, and however long you keep working towards this Zen state of holding that flame in your eyes for as long as possible without thinking about other stuff, just the candle flame. So I'm like, I can do this with a Cheerio. I can do it. And I'm like preparing myself. Here's this Cheerio. And I did. I really sought what was my inspiration? What was I supposed to do with myself? And I realized that the only time that you can find that is when you're quiet. When there's chaos and disruption and drama, you can't find that inspiration space. You can't find a muse when you're running all over the place or being bombarded. It's only when you're quiet. And I'm laying there and I feel this, just this warmth come over me and this audible voice that's, because I'm like, please, 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 my pity party thing going. And it's like, why should I help you? You've got it covered. You're good. You've always got it covered. You've got a plan, you've got a list, you got this, you got that. Why should I help? And it was just like this, oh, that's right. You are supposed to seek. For me, I need to seek something. This fly, stop it. I need to seek something bigger than myself, bigger than my agenda, bigger than my list, bigger than my, my plan. And in that moment, I'm like, okay, I need to surrender. I really do need to surrender. And I close my eyes, the Cheerio disappears, and I really went into this space of quietness, like true stillness. What am I actually supposed to do? What is important? What is the best possible course for even just the next 3 months of my life? I have these 4 little kids, and I'm kind of lost. It was the first time my husband had got a real job, so he was gone all day long, and I was just like, what am I supposed to do? And I open my eyes after I don't know how long, and my 2 older ones are like, this. And they're like, what are you doing? Well, my older one's talking, and he's like, what are you doing? And the other one shoves a Cheerio in his mouth. And I'm like, oh, okay, there's probably more Cheerios. I could probably find another one. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I was just having a little timeout. Mommies need timeouts too. And they're like, okay, where's the food? And anyway, and it was that moment where I was like, okay, what? And so then I realized I need to get quiet. At least once a day, I need to find this space. I need to get quiet, whether it's the bathroom, the closet. I'm infamous for hiding in the laundry room. And just find this thing. And so I researched what are meditative things. There's lots of words for the contemplative arts. You can meditate, you can pray, you can, find a Zen state, you can affirmations, mantras, there's lots of ways to find that quiet, still place. And so I started researching that. For me, it was therapeutic breathing. And so it was like, breathe in, breathe out. And it has not only helped me find that muse for myself, but it also then helps me calm down. It's anxiety relieving, it's all these things. And so then I was like, okay, I've got it. I've got a formula now, because I'm all about formulas. And I'm like, now I own this. It's mine. Forever I will be comfortable because I have this thing. Well, of course, that isn't the state of how life goes. And, on we go. And so then I'm sitting here looking at these kids, and I realize, oh, I have this unbelievable opportunity to offer them the life that I felt like I had. It doesn't have to be full of chores and just the drudgery. Like, I was training them that life was drudgery, and that was sad, and I was convicted of, like, gosh, you didn't have that life. Why would you want to impose this on these 4 perfect little, creative creatures at this point? And so it was like, okay, what can I do? And I knew in my heart, I was an artist. I was a creative person. So I'm like, you know what? We're going to do this different. And at that point, we had decided to homeschool, which was, I bought the curriculum and I hung the posters, and I basically made my dining room look like a public school classroom. And it was miserable. It was terrible. Like, everybody cried every day, including me. Nobody wanted, Isabel, which is my third, she was the only one who wanted to fill out the worksheets, and they were sad. I was sad. Everything was going wrong. And so I was like, okay, we're going to do this different. We need to find a different way to do this. And so for me personally, it was like, what is different? Well, of course, I found the most bizarre, obscure possible way to, homeschool my kids, which was unschooling I'm sure there's people that are like, oh, no, not that. But they worked out. It worked out, I swear. If you've ever met any of them, they're okay. And so it was going to the library. It was going to the park. It was painting murals. It was planting a garden. It was learning to sew. It was cooking. It was all these things that they probably can't tell you all the times tables. And they probably don't know the capitals of every country or state in the world. But they do know how to grow food. They know how to have a conversation. They know how to, and I felt like I was part of that. It was definitely not, I can't take credit for it, but it was that first inspiration, that first seeking of what's a better way for me as a creative person to do something. And so we went off on this couple of decade journey. Well, guess what? They grew up and they left. I mean, they're actually still there. I still pay their bills, but they're off doing their own lives. And I'm like, oh gosh, now what am I gonna do? Because I realized that I had made, instead of keeping that pure sense of Muse, I had made my children my Muse. And then they left. And so then I was back to this place of, oh no, how did I do that before? What was it? Is it a Cheerio? Is it laying on the carpet? Like, what was the formula? Because I'm all about, 1, 2, 3. And so as they're leaving and departing, I was just searching, like, what do I do again? How do I do this? And I decided, you know what? I'll go back to college. Yes, because the first time was so miserable. I must need that again. And so I enrolled in BSU, went back to college, and I thought, this time I'm going to be a good student. I'm going to do everything they tell me to do. I'm actually going to go to class, which is novel. And I'm going to, do all the work, and everybody's going to love me, and I'm going to be like, they're just going to be so excited that this old lady came back to school, and, all this stuff. And of course, I got there, and, there was some of that, like this much. And then the rest of it was just like, oh, nobody actually cares that I'm here, and so then I really started searching in that quiet place again. Why am I here? And I realized again, I had an agenda. I had a plan, I had a motive, and I had expectations. And there's that saying, expectations ruin every relationship. I had expectations, and those expectations weren't being met. And so then I had to go inside and go, what are you doing this for? Why are you really doing this? Really doing this? And I was trying to replace the relationship I had with my kids. I was trying to replace this full, noisy life that was slowly dissipating. And so then I went into it with a false motive. Yep. And so basically, she's giving me the,
you told me.
I know I did. And it's actually right on time. Okay, so anyway, I was replacing with this, so I finished my degree, I got a BFA, and I didn't have any more inspiration than I had going into it. And so then I was just kind of lost. And I came out and I was like, okay, I need to figure this out. I need to know this for my life. I need to know this so that when I do share with people, that, the Muse isn't on a shelf. The Muse isn't laying on a couch. The Muse isn't there for you to abuse it and use it up and then go find another Muse. It's inside of you. When you find inspiration in a person or a thing or a place or a vacation, it's because it's inside of you. And I kept chasing I have a filing cabinet in my hippocampus called Do Not Disturb. And that's where anything that I really don't want to bother me goes to hide because I'm stomping around, controlling everything. And I was like, oh, I need to get rid of that filing cabinet for one thing, and I need to lure this very tender, creative, beautiful thing back out into the open. And I need to figure out a way to keep it there, and not because I own it and not because I want to abuse it, but because it deserves to be in the light. And I need to stop being so sure about, this is how you do it. This is how you do it. This is how you do it. And that's my lifelong struggle. And so basically back to the beginning when I was so sure what I was going to say to you and I was going to be so inspiring and all of these things, I don't know anything. And every single day I'm just dragging that Muse back out going, please don't go hide, stay with me. And you have to do that because otherwise creative people die without it. You slowly die. And I've done it. I went and worked at the mall. It was, yeah, it was awesome. let me just tell you. And so I just hope that, you know, even if I didn't inspire you, that you just know that it's in you, and it's available at any time, but you need to get quiet and you need to let the chaos subside.
Don't forget your book.
This is what I'm going to read you. Thank you. For the rebels and the misfits, the black sheep and the outsiders, for the refugees, the orphans, and the scapegoats and the weirdos, for the uprooted, the abandoned, the shunned, and the invisible ones, may you recognize with increasing vividness that you know what you know. May you give up your allegiances to self-doubt, meekness, and hesitation. May you be willing to be unlikable and in the process be utterly loved. May you be impervious to the wrongful projections of others, and may you deliver your disagreements with precision and grace. May you see with the consummate clarity of nature moving through you that your voice is not only necessary, but desperately needed to sing out of this muddle. May you feel shored up, supported, entwined, and reassured as you offer yourself and your gifts to the world. May you know for certain that even as you stand by yourself, you are not alone. And that's Sister. Really good book called Belonging, Remembering Ourselves Home. Read it. It's awesome.
So, thank you. It was perfect. It was excellent. You know, back up. We're going to take 3 questions. We have time for 3 questions. If anybody has a question, Gabby, we're going to take a few minutes. So, any questions for Miss Gabby? What are you doing now?
What am I doing? Oh, my daughter and I started a landscape design business. So we are designing, we're actually just gardeners. It's not that important. It's just, we pull people's weeds that don't want to pull their own weeds. So it's awesome. But we won't mow your lawn. So. Oh, hi.
I'm curious. They're everywhere. I'm curious how you managed with 4 kids and trying to be creative and have those quiet spaces and you know, unschooling all that. How did you manage the kind of the daily chaos of 4 kids, like feeding everybody and getting the house clean, making sure you're not in a pigsty, and like all those kind of mundane adulting things that are so creative and fun? How did you make those things part of your routine so that you could have those quiet moments?
Well, we did, and one of the things I did, which I'm sure there's child labor laws against it, but I made as soon as my kids could push a stick vacuum, like I was like, hey, you know what? It'd be really fun if you did that, and I really involved them, but I also had to give up my OCD because I really like things done a certain way, and I realized early on that if I didn't see how they did it, then I didn't actually care when it was done. You know, and, you know, as long as I didn't watch the process, you know, I was like, oh, you know, and so, and I tend to be a micromanager, which then would exasperate them because they're just like, why'd you ask me to do it if you're just going to stand here and go, why? And so then I did involve them early on, as early as possible. And honestly, it wasn't always that great. I honestly had to give up a lot of my personal need on how things had to be finished or done or at a cleanliness level. And then I also taught them how to cook. So then everybody had, all of them were making really simple things at 4 or 5 years old. I'm like, you're making sandwiches today. And I had to give up how terrible the sandwiches were, you know, or the inventions that they came up with for lunch. And again, it was probably, most people probably couldn't have, I don't know how I survived it, honestly, because it's not my nature. And so, but I just kept surrendering to the fact that it was never going to be done like I thought it should be done. And so, and then we had lists as far as like fun, hey, if we do this, we get to do this. You know, if we do this, we get to do this. And believe me, there were days when I completely was like, if somebody asks my children a question, they're going to turn me in. Because they didn't know the conventional things that other kids knew, but then yet they've all went to college. So it's like, oh, it worked out. So it was mostly me. I mostly had to let go of, or if people showed up in my house and it was a mess, you know, and my mom lives with me and she'd be like, people did not come in my house when it was a mess, you know, and it was like, well, you know, what am I going to do? If I don't let them in, then I don't have a community, you know, and I'm sure there was people that judged me I'm sure they were like, great, this is where they live, great, you know. And so it was mostly me just changing and letting a lot of stuff go, you know, and doing what I could. And at the end of the day, being like, okay, tomorrow's a new day. I get to start over, I get to try again tomorrow, you know. And I'm also extremely hyper, so I think that my speed is much like faster than maybe some other people too. Like I'm a whirling dervish, so. So, I don't know, yeah. That's it.
Okay,
Good.
we're gonna-
Kim.
So how do you, I guess I have a couple questions, but it doesn't sound like money was necessarily a struggle. You had the support of your husband. And as it relates to being creative?
No, it actually, like when the economy collapsed, we actually were 11 days from our house foreclosing. I mean, we struggled. My husband was a professional hockey player and we never made any money. So he was like not that guy that made all the money. And so there were many humbling times. I mean, the last 5 years of our life have been the only time that we've had abundance. And so it really was sharing and co-oping and, hey, if you got one of these, I got one of those. And we were fortunate to live in a house that was inexpensive. Like we got it before it was crazy expensive. And we didn't have a phone, we didn't have cable. There was a point where we didn't have furniture because I had to sell all of our furniture. And so I was like, I got fitness balls and everybody thought, wow, this is awesome, you know? And so we had literally a dining room, living room combination and there was like 8 fitness balls in it. And I'm like, and it was harder. Because I was raised so poor, like we were so poor. To me, it was just kind of always a personal challenge of how can we make this? And my mom, I never knew we were poor. My mom, it was just, you know, it was normal that we ate watermelon every day for 2 weeks, you know, because we got 3 boxes of watermelon, you know, wow, this is abundance, you know. For my husband, it was very hard because he was raised in an entirely different lifestyle and it was very embarrassing. He felt like, why is this not working out for me? Like, how come I can't be successful? Why don't I have a full bank account? But at the same time, it was a really cool thing because we had to search out ways to have fun and do all of this stuff with hardly anything, you know? And we just had to make stuff and, you know, I made our bread and, you know, all these things. And then also people would be extremely generous. Like sometimes we'd be out, you know, be somewhere and there would be a box of food for us or whatever. And it was just a remarkable experience. Even when I think back and I'm like, this isn't possible. Like, how did this all happen? But for me, it was just God's grace that we're alive and that it turned out and nobody hates each other yet. So. And I think that when you do have a community, when you really do just kind of open up and go this, and I mean, anybody who knows me well enough, my one thing is just that I'm just who I am. You know, you'll like me or don't like me, and that's kind of my lot in life. And I'm an open book, you know, and if I didn't have anything, Brandy knows, if I had nothing, it was like, I would just, and she'd go, hey, let's go to coffee or whatever. I'm like, I don't have any money, sorry. I can't go, you know, and it was okay. I mean, it was okay for me. It was not okay for my husband. He really grew a lot because he just was not accustomed to that at all.
So if I could have a part
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
So based in some of the, like, I guess in my mind, I make them like, okay, well, I have to do this to make this work in life. Like the things that you have to do to make life work. And it feels like my challenge is that energy fights against creative energy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm wondering how
It does.
how
I
you
do.
manage to get in the creative energy space despite the have-tos, gotta make it work, gotta do
Right.
this, gotta do that.
Yeah, and that really was a lot of it too for us is that I grew up with the idea that, oh, your car breaks, you walk, you know, or you know, and obviously I grew up in the age when we didn't have internet and we didn't have computers and phones and all that kind of stuff. And if we didn't have money, you didn't have a phone, you know, and if you didn't have, and so the interesting part was then like meshing those two with my husband was, because he's like, it's Thanksgiving. Like, what are we gonna have for Thanksgiving? We have to have a turkey and we have to, you know, these like parameters that culture says is true. And I'm like, I grew pumpkins, we can have baked pumpkin and I'll make rice, you know, and I was like, that's not Thanksgiving. And so it was just that finding that space of all of those cultural constructs. I mean, even like you're saying, it makes it work. To have a job and I work in Nampa, I have to be able to drive to Nampa, right? I mean, right? And then what pops up in my head, because I'm just like this constant solution maker, is I'm like, no, there's buses that go to Nampa. There's, you could actually ride your bike to Nampa. You can, there are you could carpool. You could like put it out on social media and go, hey, I need to get to Nampa 3 days a week. Is there somebody I can ride with? So I'm always that person. Whereas my husband's like, no, we need a car. I'm not going unless I'm in my own car and whatever. And so it's like, you have to decide what you're like inside. What are you comfortable to give up, right? And when do you let your expectations die away? Like, because it is all expectation based. It's like, I did this, I expect that. And I think we live in a prosperity culture that if you don't have a bank account and you don't have money and you don't have this or that or status, then you don't matter. And I feel the opposite. I think it's the people that matter the most to me are the people that are like, I don't got nothing. I don't know nothing. Let's try to help each other a little bit. And that's where my son would say, you are a communist.
We're going to end on that note.
Perfect. Thank you.